Now, in response to the El Niño impact that has hit southern Africa's corn crop yields, the UN's World Food Programme is looking to raise $400 million to assist the region. This along with the 290,000 tons of corn, which it is looking to source from Mexico and Ukraine. Thabile Nkunjana, senior economist in the Trade Research Unit at National Agricultural Marketing Council, joins us with more detail. Thank you so much for your time, Thabile. Now, how much of an impact is this corn crop shortage actually having on food security in Africa?
Good afternoon to you, Ozinati, and your viewers at home, and thanks for having me. So the reality is that the El Nino, it was bound to have a significant impact within the region, particularly the Southern African Development Community region. And the reason has been mainly because the key, producers of maize, which include South Africa and Zambia, and some other countries that produce small quantities, have been significantly impacted, by the El Nino. As a result, South Africa, which is normally the largest, normally exporter of maize, is estimated to export at least half of what, more than half of what he exported last year, which is around 1.4 million of this season. And if you can look at the data for the region for the past 5 years, on average, the region import around 1.6 million, meaning what South Africa has is even lesser than what the region requires, which is why we are seeing some developments where countries are looking outside the region, from countries like Ukraine, South America, Brazil, or even USA or Mexico, North America.
I mean, there's also the distinction, there's white maize and then there's yellow maize. Does it also provide an additional challenge that primarily in Africa we consume white maize?
Absolutely. The reality is that the world mostly produces yellow maize, which is dominantly used for animal, feed, to raise animals. For human consumption, it's mostly white maize, and the countries that primarily produce a large amounts of that. Here is South Africa, Mexico, and some parts of small other countries. Even in South America, sometimes Argentina is said to also sometimes produce white maize. Now, because South Africa, as I said earlier on, is one of the countries that has been negatively impacted, seeing almost half of what we're going to export, then it meant that particularly there are countries that mostly rely on South Africa, including Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and then some other small countries like Lesotho. They're not going to have enough of that. And as of already, that's why a lot of countries earlier on, they began to make plans, because they knew that from our early projections that South Africa was going to produce less, and therefore they had to make contingency plans as early as possible. But it's not going to be easy, as you correctly mentioned, that there is an issue in terms of getting white maize as a result of the current, productions across the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can make plans to get it, but you have to buy it, and that needs money. And right now, the global economy is shaky. Is there an added difficulty in African governments then on a fiscal level in importing the the corn from global countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you are mentioning, that the economy has not been doing very well. As a result, even the leaders from the region, that is Southern African community development, they have been also calling for some money. I remember, I think there was an announcement that about 5.5 million from one country was going to be needed, and the World Food Program has said that they also need something around 400 million. That's a lot of money, given the current, because that money is coming from the donors, and the donors they supply money based on how much they make and how much is available. And given the currently economic issues, there's been a lot of challenges to be able to raise that amount of money. But we are hoping that countries can be able to to get that, because I mean around 20 million over at least from several countries from the region.
Just on that, Thabile, I mean, you talk about the donations. Would you say that there is a willingness from countries to donate, but it's just the capability and the ability at this point that might provide a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, but of course, countries it differs from country to country.
Yeah,
Some countries have been impacted, differently by economic, issues,
yeah,
as you can as already saw from the IMF, giving projections in terms of how each countries have been impacted by different factors.
yeah.
So for some countries, it's really going to be difficult, but for some that have been doing not so bad, they're going to be in a position to do that. But of course, that is going to depend on how much, of do they need for themselves. As I was saying earlier on, that things have not been very easy
Yeah.
for all the countries, but of course this varies across the world. Primarily for the countries that are within the southern part of the continent, that is Africa,
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely going to be a challenge, for those countries to be able to that. Because remember,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the region is already a region that has always been, impacted, by several shocks, be it's climate change,
Yeah.
related issues, and of course the pandemic that already had a very significant impact earlier on in the past few years. Some countries they're still, recovering from that. There has been quite a lot of a higher inflation to several countries. So this is going to be depending on several countries based on how
Mm.
much each country has been impacted by all the factors that normally affect the economies.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and giving us insights on the latest developments there on that maize shortage and really countries scrambling to get in those imports into Africa. Thank you so much for your time, Thabile. That was Thabile Nkunjana, Senior Economist in the Trade Research Unit at National Agricultural Marketing Council.